Hi, I'm Kat Bell, and for today's update for Project Hoops, we'll be doing the tie-dyeing part. So we have one-step tie-dye kit from Tulip, and we're using a particular method that involves paintbrushes, and I have this lid for a tray and this drop cloth to protect it, and a couple different cups for using the dye. So to get started, we're just going to open up this package. And for Project Hoops, we'll be doing blue tones for my sister's outfit and purple tones for mine. And I'll just be using this smaller thing I made for my cat to test it out. So we have this project guide thing that we're not going to be using that. Some rubber bands that we're not really going to use for this tie-dye project. Some gloves that come with it. And for the smaller one, we're going to start off with these two colors. So we have mint and lavender. And actually the package came with extra little packs of the colors. So that was kind of nice. So it came with all the different colors for this particular package. And we're just going to be using these two. Like I said, so this is the lavender and the mint, and these are going to be the lightest colors for me and my sister's outfits, and these are just the two colors we're practicing with for my cat's outfit. And so, yeah, we have a little cape for him and a small beak. So we're just gonna prep the surface now. Now that we have our surface prepped and gloves on my hands to protect me from the dye, I just made a small batch of the coloring. So we have the mint in the blue cup, lavender in the purple, and just clear water in the red cup. We also have the fabric dampened, which is typical of what you want in tie-dyeing. You usually cover wet the shirt and get whatever pattern you want, usually using the rubber bands to do something, but we're just going to have it flat out because we're using a brush technique. And for this, basically we're just getting the gradient effect that you would kind of get by dip dyeing, but just brushing it on instead. So for what we're going for, we wanted to do a gradient from the original color of the fabric, which is that white and gray swirl pattern, into, for autumns, we're doing into the mint and then into the lavender. For my sister's, it's going to be from this mint to a darker blue, and for mine, it's going to be the lavender into a darker purple. This was also a good test to see if the lace we were using would even dye, which it turns out later it did not. It sort of picked up the color a little bit, but it didn't turn like a vibrant shade of the color we were going for. But overall, it was a pretty good test of things. After working a while on this and seeing the very pale color it was coming out, we did decide to add a little bit more dye to the mix just to get it a richer color. Since we did want a kind of pastel kind of look, we didn't want it quite this light. So we just added a little bit more dye to the water and then pretty fine. And here's where we go with a little bit darker dye, and it's like already immediately better looking. The dye does dry a little lighter, which is why we were a little concerned with it being so pale when it was still wet. And here you can just see how that kind of gradient works going from the purple to the blue. And the reason we're doing this technique was because we weren't doing a gradient with one color. Although mine did kind of turn out that way because the lavender, lilac, and purple were actually very similar. So it wasn't quite as noticeable, the gradient on my stuff, as it was on my sister's, with the difference between the different colors and the hues of the blue. And with the dip dye, it would be easier with one color. Additionally, this method is also a little bit more controlled than just dipping it in the dye and getting that natural gradient, because the dye does kind of work its way up through the fabric through the dampness, so it's just a little bit more controlled. Now we let this dry and we'll see how it turns out. Okay, so these are the beaks for us. So blue for sister, purple for me, and we're going to start with the lightest color the furthest back, and then we're going to work our way to the tip of the beak. Okay. And for the beaks as well as for the capes, I went ahead and used straight from the bottle since we're using a lot more dye on these since they're a larger project. But overall it was the same deal. Get the color onto the fabric and then spread it out using the brush to get that gradient effect, going from no color to some of the color to, well, the lightest one, and then from the light one to the mid-dark one, and then to the darkest color. And I went from the hood, I went from the lightest to the darkest toward the bottom, and for the beak I went from the lightest towards the back to the darkest in the front. It's important to note that once the dye was how I liked, it needed to be left to dry, then re-wet and wrung out. So basically it's just rinsing out any of the excess dye that's not sticking to it, and then throwing it in the wash. And then once it's dry completely again, it's ready to go and can be washed and dried and used like regular clothes. Here they are dry. Mine did take 2 coats, whereas sister's was fine right from the get-go. And it just goes from the darker color fading back into the original color, the gray and white swirly pattern. And overall it was a pretty fun experience. It was pretty easy using the brushes. I'm not sure how I would have done the dip dyeing. You would have needed a lot more dye for that. But yeah, it's pretty fun. And see you in the next video. Bye!